Welcome to another interview conducted by Groundwaves. Today we mark the remembrance of 40 years since July 1983, a dark chapter in Sri Lanka's history marked by widespread anti-Tamil riots and a violence resulting in significant loss of life, displacement and ethnic tensions. This deepening grim event created wounds that still remain. So today we have with us Ambika Satkunanathan to share her experiences on the Black July. She is the former Commissioner of the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka and is a human rights activist and a lawyer. Her advocacy is focused on human rights, justice and equality. She has been involved in various human rights organizations and initiatives in Sri Lanka. During her tenure, she worked on investigating human rights violations, promoting accountability, and advocating for protection of human rights in Sri Lanka. She has also been involved in documenting and addressing issues related to enforced disappearances, arbitrary detention, torture, and extrajudicial killings. She has been vocal about the need for transitional justice and reconciliation in Sri Lanka, particularly in the context of country's civil war. So Ambika, how did your life change after the events of Black July? And I suppose you must have been very small back in the day.
I have memories of Black July which are like flashes, frames, not a complete, if you're watching a movie, it is not 5 minutes of the reel, but just flashes and compartments. How it changed my life, I suppose, is that day I felt a sense of fear. And that was the day as a child when you realize that the environment you live in is not secure and you have no safety anywhere, because when before our house was attacked, we had to jump the wall and go to a neighbor's house. When we were there, we heard, and when you're a child and you hear this loud noise crashing and things are just crashing and breaking, clearly they were breaking everything in the house. And that seemed to go on and you're frightened and you want it to stop. It stops. Thereafter, we left that place and we went to another place to spend the night. But the family also was, the extended family was also there, but we were separated. So my mother, sister and uncle were in one place. And in that place overnight, the very next house was set on fire. So we could see the flames. There was a large garden and we were hoping the flames would not catch on to the house that we were in. The others were trapped in the house that had been attacked and smashed. They were trapped in the kitchen, about 10 of them, because there were some neighbors as well. Around 10 persons were trapped in the kitchen all night. They couldn't even sit or stand because there were people who had come around and were looting. So they could hear these people, they could see flashes of the torchlight and they didn't want to be found. So they were sitting on their haunches like they were for most of the night. And there was one person from the area who had used to come to work at our house. He was protecting the house and he wouldn't let these people come into that house. He said, no, this is kind of my people, or I work here and you guys can't come here. That was the experience, and those experiences, I think it creates a great sense of insecurity when you're a child.
Yes.
Our parents or my parents didn't explain it to us, didn't explain why it happened or even what happened. And
it definitely must have been very difficult to understand as a child.
Exactly. You're like, why are we being attacked? Why do we have to run? Why are we frightened?
Yes.
And it was never explained to us. And also the sense of fear and insecurity that we felt, we could not express to our parents as well. We did not, but we did not understand it. My sister, for a few years after that, whenever she saw smoke, anyway, when people could be burning garbage, etc., she would start crying because trauma, remembering that, and she got frightened and she would start crying. So therefore, it created that sense of insecurity, sense of fear that you can't be safe. and also that there is something wrong here, and there is, but you don't know what it is.
Yes.
As you grow is when you understand that what the injustice,
Yes.
the discrimination,
Yes.
that is afterwards. But at that time, that sense of that we don't belong, or people are saying that we don't belong here.
Yes. So talking about that, the fact that the feeling of you not belonging in a particular place that you thought is yours and all of that. So how did you and your community cope with the aftermath of the riots? And also, were there any support systems or initiatives in place to assist the affected individuals?
How did we cope? I think my family, most people went to Jaffna, went to the north.
Yes.
Because they felt they would be safe there.
Yes.
Many of them remained there. My parents were public servants, so they did not remain there. They had their jobs, so they came back. They stayed in that house, they repaired that house, and then they brought us back. But when we were returning, there was always that sense of fear.
Yes.
Something could possibly happen. And that sense of fear remained even within the community if you're talking about coping mechanisms.
Yes.
So, for instance, the Tamils in Colombo,
yes.
or living in the south, they would always, and I distinctly remember this, they would always, like my mother, and I know others did it, they would keep things like passports, birth certificates, all of it packed in one place where where if something happened, that is what you will take, even if you can't take anything else, because that was so important to you.
Vigilant, yeah.
Yeah. And if some incident happened, like if there was a bomb blast, we would fear, oh, well, that's going to be a backlash against us because there was a bomb blast. They're going to think, and therefore, when things like that happen, there would be tension in houses, in people's minds. And many people I know, because we did it, sometimes when certain terrible incidents happened, like let's say, central bank bomb blast,
yes.
Where it's like awful, so many casualties. Then people would also prepare. They're like, okay, kind of keep a ladder next to the wall. Because if something happens, you can jump, or you keep a high table.
Yes.
We've done that. We did that in the past.
To live with it,
exactly,
very difficult.
Exactly. So I would say the community didn't cope particularly well. They had to cope every day because the threat, the sense of insecurity, danger was ever present.
Yes.
When the riots happened, I can't say about support mechanisms. Because I wasn't, I didn't know what they were at that time,
yes.
clearly. What I remember was we went to Hindu College,
yes.
which was turned into an IDP camp. And that is where we were until we took the ship to go to Jaffna.
Right.
So public servants stepped up. So even my father, people who would just stepped up, and they would help with the distribution. They would help with making that place livable. What do we need? That I remember doing. But from what I learned afterwards, there weren't mechanisms to support these people, to support them, to provide for them. Of course, the rations, and I think they did provide things like that. And then, of course, they organized the ships to take them away. But maybe they were hoping they would go and not come back. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I would say people had to cope with whatever resources they had, and people in the community also, as they always do when it's anything, even natural disasters, right? The state fails, the citizens step up. They step up.
Yes. So also, that being said, so in your opinion, what were the underlying factors or triggers that led to the outbreak of violence during Black July? And that's quite technical, I know that's very... and also, did this situation escalate very quickly? But I'm sure as an 8-year-old back in the day, it might be quite...
what led to it? Well, we know what appeared to lead to it was the 13 soldiers being ambushed and killed.
Yes.
And their bodies were brought back here, and the riots started that night itself, soon after the funerals, and it spread to different parts. But of course, it wasn't as spontaneous. They say it was that, but it wasn't spontaneous, because we know now that people had electoral lists, so they knew which home was Tamil and which home was Sinhalese. which is why the Sinhalese and Muslims' homes were not attacked. So if you had electoral lists, random rioters during a spontaneous riot cannot get their hands on electoral lists. Hence, this was something that was planned. So the state has to take responsibility for it. We use the word pogrom, P-O-G-R-O-M, to say that it was something that was deliberate and something that was planned. It did spread to other parts, various different parts of Colombo, and also to other parts of the country. The situation, I would say the situation did escalate, because by night you heard that there was some trouble, and then by morning you were like, people didn't go to work because they heard of houses. And even when I remember when our house, we didn't know exactly what was happening, and we didn't think it would come. So you could hear the noise, because we went to the next house, we jumped over the wall, but by that time you could see the smoke and you could hear the noise, which meant that the people were probably at the top of the road coming to attack us, because you can hear far away the noise and the commotion. The people didn't have information, but it did escalate quickly. But the way it escalated showed that it was planned.
Yes. So talking about these things in general, whenever we talk about Black July, it is a common thing that we come across, that we think, is it really a matter of ethnic harmony, or was there really a driving force that was behind all this? And talking about that, as a child, do you remember if there was anybody or any set of people who helped you out or did a particular brave act, a kind act towards you and your family and your loved ones? And does that leave any good memory of ethnic harmony in your memory?
Well, the people whose house we took refuge in while our house was being attacked, they did a kind act by taking us in, and since then I don't remember anything else. I have no memory of, but I have read since then, clearly over the years, I have read of people intervening to stop houses from being attacked, people safeguarding others, people challenging the rioters, people saving lives. Yes, of course, we've heard of those stories.
Yes. So Ambika, now that we spoke about the insight that it gave into your personal life, right? It has changed in massive ways. Similarly, is there any insight that you can add into how it politically changed you, and also how it affected your advocacy for who you are today?
One thing I would like to say is how it affected my advocacy and my politics, but also generally the politics in Sri Lanka and the ethnic conflict. That is important to say, because 1983 was a marker. It was a marker because that is what made all these youth, particularly involved in armed groups, think there is no space for negotiated settlement, and they actively engaged in an armed struggle. It also, because I've interviewed scores of people who were involved in all the different armed groups, and 83 was definitely a factor that drove youth to volunteer and to become part of these armed groups, because when they saw the injustice and they saw decades of negotiations leading nowhere, they took arms, many of them. That was a great recruiting strategy also for the armed groups, because people went willingly. They too felt unsafe and they were angry as well. Where my politics are concerned, that is what led me to also realize, okay, there is injustice, there is discrimination. So what is going on in our country? What is the history? Why did they do this to us? What is our place? To learn more about it, and to learn, and that sense of injustice has happened, and wanting to do something, the work, what I studied, where I started working, what I started working on, all driven by, I suppose, that experience. And that, the sense of insecurity, fear that we felt, also because of the ethnic conflict, as I said, it persisted. And it's personal and political. I'll explain how, using an example, which is the pottu is something that Tamil women wear. it's kind of an ethnic marker. You know, it was also something that identified
Strong marker.
identified you as a Tamil, which could place you at risk. I had a friend who used to say, a much older person who used to tell me, that the size, you could figure out the political situation in the country based on the size of her pottu. Because if she felt more secure, the pottu would be larger. If she felt insecure, the pottu would grow smaller.
Yes.
I myself, for a long time, I did not wear pottu because I feared I would be, when I was younger, I would be identified as a Tamil, which meant that, you know, you could be treated differently, discriminated, harassed, whatever. Then as I got older as well, I started wearing it. But when you traveled, let's say in the car, I would take it off, and I've said this before, take it off and stick it somewhere, because you did not want them to stop you at a checkpoint. If they saw the pottu, they would think, Tamil, stop. Then God, you got to get out, or maybe ID, they want to check your boot, they want to check your bag, who knows, right? So then, and you put it back on when you got to your destination. Therefore, that is, you know, personal experience. Also, when I went, became in a way political, because when I was appointed to the Human Rights Commission, to work, clearly, you know, state institution, got to wear the sari.
Yes.
Yeah. That's a whole other conversation about gender and this kind of dress and all
true.
that. But we won't go into
day.
Yeah, that's for another day. We won't go into that. So I would always wear it was actually slightly bigger than this.
Right.
Quite bigger. I was downsized a bit. It was bigger. And the reason for wearing that, for me, it was very important. And people also recognized me by the pottus. Even
Yes.
people who were introduced to me who didn't remember my name would say, oh, that the commissioner with the pottu, right?
Yeah.
And for me, it's very important because the pottu was something I could not wear, because there was a sense of insecurity. You feel like you didn't have place there, you didn't have rights, and you were afraid of being harassed.
Yes.
Here I was, a member of the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka,
Yes.
which meant that was a position that people had to respect. You had
Exactly.
certain powers bestowed on you in public trust by the law.
Yes.
And you had rights. You could have certain, that where you could do certain things. So then there was the confidence, yes, I do have a place. So this is my ethnicity. You have to accept me as a Tamil within this space, saying and doing certain things, whether you like it or not.
That's satisfaction.
That is important.
Yes.
So, for instance, to be able to go to a place like
Yes.
Busa Detention Center with your pottu, and they are not been used to, they were not at that time, because the previous Human Rights Commission also had not visited any of these
Yes.
places for many, many years. So when we went, we were kind of new to them. They're like, Human Rights Commission? So, and what is this Tamil woman there with this big pottu doing there, right? And you tell them, we want to see all of them, and please, you can't stay here, this is confidential, please leave. And they're wondering what is going on.
Yeah.
But it was important for you to be accepted with your ethnicity for who you are, right? Not just the qualifications or whatnot, but yes, you are a Tamil Sri Lankan woman.
Yes.
But the Tamil is there. That is part of your identity.
That's right.
And having the ethnicity there visibly was also important, because I wanted people to realize, just because of my ethnicity, I'm not going to discriminate against Sinhalese. That's not how I'm going to function.
Yes.
I will work based on laws, on rules, on principles. And I would like to say this is something that I'm personally proud of.
All right. So that being said, in the years following Black July, what steps do you think have been taken to heal the wounds and address the underlying causes of the violence? And also, are there any ongoing efforts to promote reconciliation and prevent such incidents from happening again?
Oh gosh, I wish I could say I would answer in the affirmative, but sadly it's all negative. Not only did they not try to heal the wounds, they just created new wounds in terms of everything that has happened. And even after the war ended, there were very little attempts made. And if any attempt was made, it was only to appease the international community, or to tick a box, or to keep the Human Rights Council at bay. It was not done with the intention, thinking, acknowledging we do have a problem. And in a sense, the ethnic conflict has not been resolved. The armed conflict has ended. There are still problems that need resolution, like a political solution. And to take efforts to respond to the needs of the victims in terms of truth, justice, reparations, nothing. Preventing, well, instead of preventing, what have we seen? We've seen riots against the Muslims.
Right.
We have seen Alutkama. We have seen Digana. We have, since then, and this is in the last, when was it? 8 years, right? Eight or 10 years is when we've seen a number of incidents of violence against the Muslim community, which is, again, it's a repetition indicative of deep-rooted problems in our society that no one is willing to accept. And one of them is definitely that the state, the nature of the state, the Sinhala Buddhist nationalist ethos that drives the state, which makes it think that, oh, you know, Muslims have a place and Tamils have a place and they must know their place. It's all that, right? So I would say nothing has been done, particularly prevention. And for prevention, what you need is you need equality, you need equity, and you need accountability. The state needs to be held accountable. The police need to be held accountable.
Yes.
The military need to be held accountable. But here they are not. So they think, and forget about all this, just general torture. When someone is arrested for supposed theft, what do they do to that person? When someone is arrested for having a little bit of, some small quantity of narcotics, what do they do to the person, right? So therefore, the police think that they can engage in this kind of abuse and violence because there is impunity. And we have people who use ethnicity, who engage in ethno-nationalist politics to win votes. This means when election comes, there'll be anti-Muslim rhetoric or there'll be anti-Tamil rhetoric, and we can see all of that happening now itself with the arrest that happened of the comic, etc., all of it. And instead they use this to win votes. And there are political parties, and sometimes we even had governments that have created, enabled, supported right-wing, racist groups, you know, such as the Bodhubala Sena, for instance. I don't mind naming them. I think we need to be, this is not like Harry Potter, no? He who shall not be named. So,
Anonymous.
exactly. We're not going to do that. So, like the Bodhubala Sena, which is engaged consistently in anti-Muslim hate campaign. But the ICCPR Act was not used against them. Instead, Shaktika Saktumar, a short story writer, Ahnaf Jasim, a poet. Now we have Natasha, comic. We had a woman wearing a ship wheel who was arrested, all of them under ICCPR. So you can see that the state is abusive, violent state infused with the Sinhala Buddhist nationalist ethos, and practically every government as well that has been elected has also acted in the same manner, and what they have done is weaponized law. Previously, we used to have the riots, we used to have the white vans. Now what they're doing is they're weaponizing the law. There's no white van, but you might be remanded at New Magazine prison. Take note. So that is what is happening. So the state in Sri Lanka, it is so incredibly dysfunctional, corrupt, abusive, violent.
Yes.
But if we are going to change that, bringing just new laws or establishing new institutions is not going to make the change, because the change also has to be in social behavior,
yes,
in people's mindsets.
Practicality.
And also, how do even political parties, you know, they talk about democracy, no internal party democracy.
Yes.
And all of them, they're like engaging in different forms of ethno-nationalist politics,
Yes,
pretty much all the parties,
yeah,
right? When you do that, how can you have a society, the society, whoever is in government, in parliament, reflects who we have in society.
That's
You
right.
want to change that, then you got to change this. Second thing, we talk about accountability, right? Rajapaksa's, are accused of, if they're accused of multi-million or rupee corruption, everyone is outraged. But they don't think twice about paying bribe to get something done at the government department or to escape a traffic fine, giving a small bribe to the policeman. They don't think. Excuse me, if you're going to do that, that's definitely going to do that with a lot more
Yes.
power. you want accountability there, you start from here.
So Ambika, like we spoke about earlier as well, so we were talking about this, do the youth really know about this Black July? When we say the word Black July, is it known by many people exactly for what it was?
Yeah.
So the discussion, is it really enough, or what do you think?
Good
should
question. Because we should actually be teaching all this in school. It should be in our textbooks, but it is not. And that is deliberately. We don't have our troubled history in our school books. But we do need to, because if you want to prevent things like this from happening, you need to teach the young people what happened, and you need to teach them why it happened and why it should not happen again. If not, what they will be exposed to is the racist propaganda. And now, there's plenty of all that in social media. Unless the education system, unless families make a concerted effort to do this. I've worked with scores of young people, particularly at the Human Rights Commission. And what I found is many of them were not aware of the history. It's only when they came to the commission and during our conversations, during discussions, because of some work they had to do, they didn't understand the context, so they would Google and look for something that tells them the history. That's how they became aware of it, and they become politicized. Being politicized is good, because we're not talking about party politics here. Politicized in having, understanding, why politics is important. Why you need to be active. What are your civic duties? Having an ideological basis from which you engage with these issues. That is important. And therefore, I would say, even what Groundviews is doing, that is important. You need to get it out there. We need the media to do more, and the media really doesn't. We instead have the media propagating, spreading misinformation, disinformation, anti-minority rhetoric, racist rhetoric is what we see many of the media organizations spreading. So we do need the media to do more, because we need our youth to know our history. If you want the future to be different, you need to know what happened in the past.
That's right. So Ambika, thank you for sharing your experiences and the insights about the events of Black July 1983. And your first-hand experience has provided valuable perspectives on a significant and tragic chapter in Sri Lanka's history. But the important fact is that these wounds still remain. This is Amma Korlage representing Groundwaves.